The space station called Nexus 7 was not a place for honest people. It floated in the dark space between three lawless systems, and it welcomed criminals, smugglers, and killers with open arms. The corridors smelled of burned metal and cheap alcohol. The lights flickered because nobody cared enough to fix them. And in every shadow, dangerous creatures watched and waited. Grezik had worked as a bartender on Nexus 7 for 20 years. He was a small gray alien with 4 arms and tired eyes. He had seen everything. He had served drinks to warlords and murderers. He had cleaned blood off his counter more times than he could count. Nothing surprised him anymore. But tonight, the entire station had gone quiet. Grezik stood behind his bar and watched the main entrance. Around him, dozens of aliens from different species sat frozen in their seats. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Even the usual fights had stopped. Everyone was looking at the massive figure walking through the door. Vraighthus, the Unbroken, had arrived. He stood 7 feet tall, covered in dark green scales that could stop a knife. His eyes were yellow and cold like a dead star. His claws were long enough to tear through metal, and his teeth were sharp enough to bite through bone. He wore armor made from the hulls of ships he had destroyed, and he carried weapons that most species could not even lift. For 40 galactic cycles, Vraighthus had worked as a mercenary. He took contracts that others refused. He killed targets that others feared. He had burned colonies, destroyed fleets, and ended entire bloodlines. The stories about him were told in whispers across 100 worlds. Parents used his name to scare their children into behaving, and he had never lost. Not once. Not ever. Grezik watched as Vraighthus walked slowly toward the bar. The crowd parted like water around a stone. Nobody wanted to be close to him. Nobody wanted to accidentally make eye contact. A young Kalori merchant was not paying attention. He was drunk and arguing with his friend about money. He stepped backward without looking and bumped directly into Vraighthus. The entire room held its breath. The Kalori turned around, and his blue face went pale when he saw who he had touched. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. His hands began to shake. I'm sorry, the Kalori finally managed to say. Please, I did not mean to. I have a family, please. Everyone expected blood. Everyone expected the Kalori to die screaming. That was what Vraighthus did. That was who he was. But the massive reptilian mercenary simply looked down at the trembling merchant for a long moment. Then he stepped around him and continued walking toward the bar. Not worth the trouble, Vraighthus muttered. Grezik's 4 hands nearly dropped the glass he was cleaning. In 20 years, he had never seen Vraighthus show mercy to anyone. Something was wrong. Something had changed. The mercenary sat down heavily on a reinforced stool and placed his clawed hands on the counter. Up close, Grezik could see old scars crossing the scales on his face. He could see the weight in those yellow eyes. Strong drink, Vraighthus said. His voice was deep and rough like stones grinding together. The strongest you have. Grezik nodded and poured a glass of Vorlani fire whiskey. It was strong enough to kill most species. Vraighthus drank it in one swallow and pushed the glass forward for more. The door opened again, and a small group of humans walked in. They were freighter crew by the look of them. Tired faces, simple clothes, nothing special about them. Their captain was a man of average height with brown hair and tired eyes. He laughed at something one of his crew said and walked toward a table in the corner. Grezik happened to be watching Vraighthus at that moment. And he saw something impossible. The most feared mercenary in 3 sectors flinched. It was small. Just a tiny movement. His massive shoulders tensed, and his eyes followed the human captain for just a second too long. Then Vraighthus looked away and drank another glass of whiskey. Grezik was old, but he was not stupid. He had survived this long by paying attention to details. And this detail was too interesting to ignore. That human, Grezik said carefully, keeping his voice low. His name is Danny Cole. He runs cargo between the outer systems. Nothing illegal as far as I know. Just a simple freighter captain. Breakthus did not respond. Strange, Grezik continued, that you would notice him at all. He is not wealthy. He is not famous. He is not dangerous. All humans are dangerous, Breakthus said quietly. Grezik almost laughed. Humans, they are small. They are slow. They live short lives and break easily. The Galactic Council classifies them as a moderate threat at best. Breakthus turned his head slowly and looked at Grezik with those cold yellow eyes. The bartender felt a chill run through his body, but he did not look away. He was too curious now. You want to know why I let that fool live tonight? Breakthus asked. Grezik nodded. Because I am tired of killing. And because of them. He gestured slightly toward the corner where the humans sat laughing and talking. Because of what I learned about their kind. What did you learn? Breakthus was silent for a long moment. He stared at his empty glass like it held answers he could not find. Then he spoke again, and his voice was different. Heavier. Older. 12 cycles ago, I took a contract against a human colony. 200 farmers on a small moon. Easy money, I thought. Simple work. I brought my best warriors. We had weapons and ships and numbers on our side. He paused and poured himself another drink. I was the only one who survived. Grezik felt his heart beating faster. What happened? Sit down, bartender. Breakthus pushed a glass toward him. And let me tell you why I will never take another contract against humans. Let me tell you what they become when you threaten what they love. The noise of the station faded away. The other customers kept their distance, sensing that something important was happening. Danny Cole and his crew continued their quiet conversation in the corner, unaware that they were being discussed. And Breakthus began to tell his story. It started with a syndicate crime lord named Drellick. He wanted a small colony destroyed because they refused to pay him protection money. He came to me because I was the best. Because I had never failed. 12 cycles before that night on Nexus 7, Breakthus stood in the throne room of the Vorlon Syndicate. The room was dark and cold, decorated with trophies taken from conquered enemies. Skulls of a dozen species lined the walls. Weapons hung on display like art. The air smelled of fear and old blood. Syndicate. Master Drellick sat on a throne made of black metal. He was a Vorlon, a species known for cruelty. His skin was pale purple, and his face had no nose, just 2 slits that opened and closed when he breathed. His eyes were entirely black, and they watched everything with cold calculation. I have a contract for you, Breakthus, Drellick said. His voice was soft and dangerous. A simple one. Easy money for someone of your reputation. Breakthus stood with his arms crossed over his chest. He did not bow to anyone, not even crime lords. I do not take simple contracts. My services are expensive. This one will pay well. Drellick waved his thin hand, and a holographic display appeared in the air. It showed a small moon orbiting a gas giant in a distant system. Theta 4, a human colony. Breakthus looked at the display. The moon was gray and rocky, barely worth noticing. The colony was small. Perhaps 50 buildings clustered together near a water source. Farmland stretched out around it, and a few mining operations dotted the nearby hills. Humans, Breakthus said. Why do you need me for humans? They have refused to pay protection fees for 3 cycles now. They ignore my messages. They rejected my representatives. They even injured one of my collectors. Drellick's black eyes narrowed with anger. They think they are safe because they are far from the main trade routes. They think I will forget about them. How many? 200. Farmers and miners mostly. Families. Drellick smiled, showing rows of small, sharp teeth. I do not want survivors. I want a message sent to every other colony in my territory. Pay or burn. Breakfast studied the display more carefully. 200 humans. No military presence. No defensive systems. No fleet support within 6 days of travel. They were completely alone and completely vulnerable. The pay? He asked Drel. IK named a figure that made even Breakfast pause. It was more than he usually earned in a full cycle of work. For a simple colony elimination. For killing farmers. Why so much? Breakfast asked. He had learned long ago to be suspicious of jobs that paid too well. Because I want it done right. Because I want the best. And because... Drellick hesitated for just a moment. Because they are humans. Breakfast laughed. It was a harsh sound like rocks falling. Humans are nothing special. Weak bodies. Slow reflexes. Short lives. They are classified as moderate threat at best. Perhaps. But there are stories told by cowards. Breakfast turned away from the display. I will take your contract. Give me 10 days, and your problem will be gone. He left the throne room and began assembling his team. He chose 6 of the deadliest mercenaries in known space. Sifik was an insectoid with blades built into his arms. Morath was a massive creature covered in thick fur who could tear enemies apart with his bare hands. Zelix was a sniper who had never missed a shot. The others were equally dangerous, equally experienced. They gathered on Breakfast's warship and reviewed the mission details. Sifik projected the intelligence files about humans on the main screen. Standard biology, Sifik said in his clicking voice. They need oxygen. They sleep for 8 hours out of every 24. Their bones break easily. Their skin offers no protection. They cannot see in the dark. What about weapons? Morath asked. Basic projectile weapons mostly. Some energy weapons. Nothing we cannot handle. Their reflexes are slow compared to ours. Their strength is limited. Easy hunt, Morath said with a grin that showed all his teeth. But Sivik's antennae twitched with uncertainty. There is something else. The files mention unusual behavior patterns. Humans have been known to act unpredictably in certain situations. What situations? Breakthus asked. When they're young or threatened. When their family units are attacked. The files say they sometimes demonstrate extreme aggression and ignore personal safety entirely. Morath laughed. What species does not protect its young? This is not special. The files say it is different with humans. They do not retreat even when defeat is certain. They fight until death rather than surrender. Reichthus waved his clawed hand dismissively. Every prey fights when cornered. It does not make them dangerous. It makes them desperate. Desperate creatures make mistakes. The team agreed. They had killed thousands of targets across dozens of species. They had faced warriors far more dangerous than farmers with basic weapons. This contract was easy money. The journey to Theta 4 took 5 days. Reichthus spent the time maintaining his weapons and studying the colony layout. He identified the main buildings, the power generators, and the communication hub. He planned his attack carefully, not because he expected difficulty, but because professionalism was how he had stayed alive for so long. On the 6th day, they entered orbit around Theta-4. The moon was even smaller than it had looked in the holographic display. The colony was a tiny spot of light on a gray and lifeless surface. Reichthus almost felt insulted that someone was paying so much for such a minor target. He opened a communication channel to the colony. A human face appeared on the screen. It was a man with gray hair and a tired face. He wore simple farmer clothes and had dirt under his fingernails. "This is Kevin Marshall, colony administrator," the man said. "Who is this?" "I am Breakfast. You have 1 hour to gather your people in the central square and surrender. Anyone who resists will be killed. Anyone who hides will be found and killed. You have no fleet support within 6 days. You have no weapons that can harm my ship. Your only choice is surrender. Kevin Marshall looked at him calmly. Too calmly, Reichthus thought later. But at that moment, he did not notice. And if we surrender? Kevin asked. Then your deaths will be quick. The human was silent for a moment. His eyes seemed to look straight through the screen, straight into Reichthus. I see. Thank you for the warning. The communication ended. Reichthus turned to his crew with a predator's smile. Prepare for landing. This will be over before nightfall. He had no idea how wrong he was. Kevin Marshall stood in the communication hub and watched a black warship hanging in the sky above his colony. His hands were steady. His heartbeat was calm. He had seen ships like that before, a long time ago, in a life he thought he had left behind. His daughter Lavra ran into the room. She was 28 years old with dark hair and her mother's sharp eyes. She worked the communication systems for the colony, handling trade requests and weather reports and all the small daily business of farming life. Dad, who was that? What did he want? A mercenary named Reichthus. He is here to kill us all. Laura's face went pale. What? Why? What do we do? Kevin turned to look at her, and something in his eyes changed. The tired farmer disappeared. The gentle father disappeared. What replaced them was something colder, something harder, something that Laura had never seen in her entire life. Ring the emergency bell, Kevin said. His voice was different now, quieter, more controlled. Gather everyone in the main hall. Tell them to bring their families. Should I send a distress signal? Yes, but the nearest fleet is 6 days away. Help will not arrive in time to save us. We must save ourselves. Lavra ran to do as he asked. Kevin walked to his small house at the edge of the colony. He moved aside his bed and opened a hidden panel in the floor. Inside was a military-grade rifle, a sidearm, body armor, and a knife with a worn handle. He had not touched these things in 12 years. He had hoped he would never touch them again. 10 minutes later, 200 colonists filled the main hall. They were farmers with calloused hands, miners with dust on their clothes, teachers, engineers, doctors. Children sat with their parents, confused and scared by the sudden emergency. Kevin stood at the front of the hall and looked out at his people. He knew them all by name. He had helped them build this colony from nothing. He had delivered some of their children into the world. In less than 1 hour, he said, a mercenary force will land here and try to kill every one of us. Men, women, and children. They were hired by the Vorland Syndicate because we refused to pay their criminal fees. Voices rose in fear and confusion. Parents held their children tighter. Some people began to cry. Quiet. Kevin's voice was not loud, but it cut through the noise like a blade. The hall fell silent. I know you are scared. I know most of you came here looking for peace, a quiet life, a safe place to raise your families. He paused and looked around the room. But I also know who you really are. I know why you chose this distant moon in the middle of nowhere. I know what you were before you were farmers. He pointed to a large man with a gray beard. Scott, 20 years in special operations, 3 silver stars. He pointed to a thin woman with kind eyes. Beth, Marine Corps, 14 years, sniper qualified. He pointed to an old man sitting with 3 grandchildren. Marcus, intelligence officer, 30 years of service. One by one, Kevin named them. Soldiers, intelligence officers, combat medics, pilots, special forces. They had come from different branches and different countries and different wars. They had all done their duty. They had all seen enough blood. And they had all come to Theta 4 looking for quiet and peace. But peace was no longer an option. I will not lie to you, Kevin said. Help is 6 days away. We have basic weapons and no military vehicles. We are outnumbered and outgunned. Many of us will die. He paused, and his voice grew harder. But our children will not, because we are going to hold this colony until help arrives. We are going to show these mercenaries why humans were never meant to be prey. The fear in the room began to change. Kevin could see it in their eyes. Old instincts waking up, old training remembered. The peaceful farmers were disappearing, and something else was taking their place. Hidden weapons cache is under the supply building, Kevin continued. Defense positions are marked on the emergency maps. Scott, you have northern approach. Beth, take the water tower for overwatch. Marcus, coordinate communications. Lavra will maintain contact with the fleet. He looked at the children still clinging to their parents. Everyone under 16 goes to the underground shelter. It was designed to survive anything short of orbital bombardment. No matter what happens above ground, they will be safe. Within 30 minutes, the colony transformed. Weapons appeared from hidden locations. Farmers put on body armor that still fit after years of peace. Defensive positions were established using farming equipment and mining vehicles as cover. The children were led underground, where the walls were thick and the supplies would last for weeks. Laura stood at her communication console, broadcasting a distress signal on all frequencies. She watched her father moving between positions, checking weapons, encouraging defenders. She barely recognized him. "Dad," she said when he passed her station. "Who are you?" Kevin paused and looked at her with something like sadness. "I am the man who buried that question a long time ago. I hoped you would never have to meet him." He touched her shoulder gently. "Whatever happens, stay at this station. Keep that signal broadcasting, and know that I am proud of you." Then the ground shook as the first dropship landed outside the colony. Vrachthus stepped onto the gray soil of Theta 4 with his team behind him. The colony looked quiet. No movement in the streets. No sounds of panic. He found this strange, but he assumed the humans were hiding in their homes, too scared to face death. "Spread out," he ordered. Standard sweep pattern. "Kill anyone who resists." They moved toward the first building. Sifik took the lead with his blade arms ready. Morath covered the right side with his massive body. The others followed in formation, professional and confident. They never saw the first shot coming. Sivik's head exploded. The crack of a rifle echoed across the colony a moment later. Before anyone could react, 2 more mercenaries fell with holes in their chests. Vrachthus threw himself behind a storage container as bullets tore through the air around him. He felt a burning pain in his shoulder and looked down to see blood leaking from a hole in his scales. A hole in his armor-like scales. Ambush. He roared. "Return fire!" But there was no clear target. The shots came from everywhere and nowhere. From the water tower. From the windows. From behind farm equipment. The humans moved like ghosts, firing and relocating before the mercenaries could aim. In 3 minutes, 3 more of his team were dead. Vrachthus had never retreated in his life, but he was not stupid. He grabbed Morath and the one other survivor and ran for the dropship. Bullets chased them every step of the way. As the dropship lifted off, Vrachthus looked down at the colony through a window. He saw figures moving between buildings, organized, coordinated, professional. These were not farmers, and he had just lost half his team in the first assault. "What do we do?" Morath asked. His fur was matted with his own blood. Vrachthus felt something he had not felt in decades. Doubt. But he pushed it down and let anger take its place. "We call for reinforcements. And then we make them pay for every drop of blood they have taken." The reinforcements arrived on the second day. 20 more mercenaries in 3 dropships, armed with heavy weapons and ready for war. Vrachthus stood on his warship and watched them land outside the colony, with his remaining original team members and the new arrivals. He had 23 killers ready to finish the job. Surely, he thought, this would be enough. He was wrong. The siege of Theta 4 lasted 6 days. 6 days of blood and fire and death. 6 days that would haunt Vrachthus for the rest of his life. On the first day of the siege, The mercenaries pushed into the outer edge of the colony. They took heavy casualties but managed to destroy 3 defensive positions. They thought they were winning. That night, the humans counterattacked. They moved through the darkness like shadows, using tunnels that the mercenaries had not known existed. By morning, 8 more mercenaries were dead, and the outer positions were back in human hands. On the second day, Reichthus ordered a bombing run from his warship. The explosions destroyed half the colony. When the smoke cleared, the mercenaries moved in expecting to find only corpses. Instead, they found defensive positions rebuilt from the rubble. The humans had worked through the night, ignoring wounds and exhaustion, turning wreckage into barriers and burning buildings into fortified bunkers. Morith fell on the 3rd day. A bullet from somewhere he never saw took him through the eye. He had survived 100 battles. He had killed more enemies than he could count, and he died on a small gray moon fighting farmers. Reichthus began to notice things that disturbed him. Things that did not match his understanding of how prey behaved. On the 4th day, he watched a human named Scott get shot in the leg during a firefight. Any reasonable creature would have crawled to safety, would have called for help, would have prioritized survival. Instead, Scott tied his belt around the wound to stop the bleeding, picked up a fallen weapon, and continued fighting for another 2 hours before finally passing out from blood loss. Later that same day, a woman named Beth held a defensive position alone when her squad was forced to retreat. She was outnumbered 6-1. She should have run. She should have surrendered. Instead, she held that position for 9 hours, killing 11 mercenaries before she ran out of ammunition. When a mercenary finally reached her position, he found her waiting with a knife. She killed him too, before the others brought her down. On the 5th day, the humans were pushed back to the center of the colony. Their numbers were fewer now. Many were wounded. They had been fighting without sleep for days. Victory for the mercenaries seemed close, but the humans did not act like they were losing. They did not beg. They did not try to negotiate. Every inch of ground cost blood. Every building became a fortress. Parents stood in doorways, blocking access to the underground shelter where the children hid, and they did not move even when death was certain. Reichthus could not understand it. He had conquered species that were physically stronger than humans. He had defeated enemies with better technology and larger numbers. But he had never faced anything like this. This was not courage. It was something else. Something deeper and more terrifying. On the evening of the 5th day, his soldiers finally captured Kevin Marshall. The human leader had been coordinating the defense from a communications building when a mercenary squad broke through. Kevin killed 3 of them before a stun grenade knocked him unconscious. They dragged him back to Reichthus' command post and chained him to a chair. When Kevin woke up, Reichthus was standing in front of him. The mercenary's scales were cracked and bleeding from a dozen wounds. His left eye was swollen shut. He had not slept in 3 days. But he was still standing, and Kevin was now his prisoner. "Your people fight well," Reichthus said, "but they cannot win. You must know this. Your defenders are dying one by one. By tomorrow, we will break through to the shelter where you have hidden your children." Kevin looked up at him with calm eyes. There was no fear there, no panic, just a cold, steady gaze that made Reichthus uncomfortable in a way he could not explain. "You will never touch them," Kevin said. Reichthus felt anger rising in his chest. He grabbed Kevin's arm and twisted it until the bone snapped. The sound was loud in the quiet room. Kevin did not scream. His face went white with pain, and sweat broke out on his forehead. But he did not scream. "Tell me where the emergency entrance is," Reichthus demanded. "Tell me, and I will make your death quick." Kevin laughed. It was a broken sound, full of pain, but it was still a laugh. "I have had worse than this. You think pain will break me? I have lived with worse pain than you can imagine. Every soldier who came to this colony has. That is why we came here. To forget. To heal. He leaned forward, as far as his chains would allow, and looked directly into Vrykthus' yellow eyes. We did not want this fight. We wanted peace. But you came here and threatened our children. Our families. And now you will learn what humans become when everything we love is in danger. Vrykthus felt something he had not felt since he was a young warrior fighting his first battle. He felt fear. Not of Kevin. Not of any single human. But of what he saw in those eyes. A will that would not break. A fire that would not die. A promise that said, "We will fight until there is nothing left." He left Kevin in the cell and walked outside. The 6th day was beginning. The sun was rising over the destroyed colony. His forces were ready for the final assault, but Vrykthus could not shake the cold feeling in his stomach. The attack began at dawn. The mercenaries pushed forward with everything they had. The humans pushed back with everything they had left. Bodies fell on both sides. Buildings burned. The gray soil turned dark with blood by midday. Only 8 mercenaries were still fighting. Vrykthus was one of them. They were close now. So close to the shelter. A few more hours, and it would be over. Then the sky lit up with fire. 2 human warships dropped out of faster than light, traveled directly above the colony. They were military vessels, armed with weapons that made Vrykthus' ship look like a toy. Before he could even react, his warship exploded in orbit. The debris fell like burning rain. The 8 remaining mercenaries scattered and ran. The human soldiers poured down from the sky in dozens of dropships. Within hours, 7 of the 8 were dead or captured. Only Vrykthus survived, hiding in a cave outside the colony until a human patrol found him. He thought about fighting. He thought about dying on his feet like a warrior. Instead, he dropped his weapons and raised his hands. He wanted to live. He wanted to understand what had happened. He wanted to know how farmers on a forgotten moon had destroyed everything he had built over 40 cycles. The humans bound him and dragged him away, and Vrykthus did not resist. The human detention facility was not what Vrykthus expected. He had been captured before, long ago in his youth, by a rival mercenary group. They had tortured him for weeks before he escaped. He expected the same from the humans. He expected pain and darkness and cruelty. He prepared himself for it. Instead, they gave him medical treatment for his wounds. They gave him food that was strange, but not unpleasant. They put him in a cell that was clean and well lit. No one beat him. No one threatened him. Guards checked on him regularly to make sure he was healthy. It confused him deeply. 3 weeks after his capture, a human officer came to visit him. The man was perhaps 40 years old, with short gray hair and a face that had seen many battles. He wore a simple uniform with captain's bars on the collar. His name tag said Wells. Captain Ryan Wells sat down across from Vrykthus with a small device in his hands. He looked at the massive reptilian prisoner without fear or hatred. Just calm curiosity. "Do you know how many of my species you killed on Thea-4?" Ryan asked. Vrykthus did not answer. He stared at the wall and waited for the pain to begin. 63, Ryan said. 63 humans died defending that colony. Soldiers, veterans, people who had already given enough to their species and just wanted to live in peace. Still, Vrykthus said. Nothing. Ryan pressed a button on his device, and a holographic display appeared between them. It showed children playing in a field of grass. Human children, laughing and running and chasing each other under a blue sky. "Do you know what this is?" Ryan asked. Vrykthus finally looked at the display. Children. 47 of them. These are the children of Theta-4. Every single one of them survived because their parents and neighbors fought to protect them. Because 63 people gave their lives so that these 47 children could live. The display changed. Now it showed the colony after the battle. buildings destroyed, bodies covered with white sheets, humans carrying wounded comrades through the rubble. Kevin Marshall survived, Ryan said. His arm healed. His daughter Lavra is still running communications for the rebuilt colony. They lost friends, family, but they survived. Vreithus felt something strange in his chest. He had killed thousands over his long career. He had never thought twice about any of them. But something about seeing those children, knowing that his mission had been to kill them, made him feel wrong. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked. Ryan turned off the display and leaned forward. "Because I want you to understand something about humans. Something that might keep you alive in the future." "You are going to release me?" "Eventually, yes." Vreithus blinked his yellow eyes in surprise. "Why? I killed 63 of your people. I tried to murder children. Any other species would execute me." "We could execute you," Ryan agreed. "It would be legal. It would be fair. Many people would celebrate. But we will not do it. Why not?" Ryan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful and slow. "Because we do not enjoy killing. We do not seek war. Every human who fought on Theta 4 would have preferred to live in peace. They fought because they had to, not because they wanted to. And when the fighting was over, they stopped." He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Vreithus could see a garden where humans walked among flowers and trees. Most species see us and think we are weak, soft, easy prey. They see our short lives and our fragile bodies and assume we are not dangerous. Ryan turned to look at Vreithus. "They are correct. A human in peacetime is gentle, curious, kind. We build gardens and write music and raise our children with love. But when you threaten those children," Vreithus said slowly, "yes, when you threaten our children, our families, our homes, something changes. The gentle creature disappears, and something else takes its place. Something that does not care about survival or pain or fear. Something that only knows one thing: protect what we love, no matter the cost." Vreithus thought about Beth holding her position alone for 9 hours. About Scott fighting with a bullet in his leg. About Kevin laughing through the pain of a broken arm. "You want me to live," he said. "You want me to tell others." Ryan nodded. "Go back to your mercenary work. Take contracts against other species. That is not our concern. But tell them what happened on Theta 4. Tell them what we become when pushed. And tell them to never, ever target human families. You are using me as a message." "Yes." Ryan smiled, but there was no humor in it. A dead mercenary is forgotten in a year. A living mercenary who tells stories about human vengeance? That message spreads. It grows. And maybe, just maybe, it saves lives. Maybe some future crime lord will remember your story and decide that human colonies are not worth the trouble. Vreithus was held for 2 more years. During that time, he was treated well, fed, healed, even allowed to exercise and maintain his strength. The humans asked him questions about mercenary operations and criminal networks. He answered some and refused others. They never forced him. When they finally released him, they gave him a small ship and enough fuel to reach neutral space. Captain Ryan Wells walked him to the landing bay personally. "Remember what you learned here," Ryan said. "And remember this. We let you live. We could have killed you 100 times. But we chose mercy. That is also something humans do." Vreithus looked at the small man standing before him. 2 years ago, he would have killed this human without hesitation. Now, he found himself nodding with something close to respect. "I will remember," he said. And he meant it. Grezik the bartender sat in silence as Vreithus finished his story. The bar around them had gone quiet. Other customers had drifted closer to listen. Even the humans in the corner seemed to have noticed the strange mood in the room. "So that is why you do not take contracts against humans anymore," Grezik said. That is why I do not take contracts against humans. Vraithus drained his glass and set it down heavily. I have killed hundreds in my life. I have burned worlds. I have done terrible things. But I will never touch another human colony. Because you are afraid? Vraithus laughed his rough stone laugh. Afraid? Yes, but not just afraid. I have faced many enemies. None of them fought like those farmers. None of them had that fire in their eyes, that absolute refusal to surrender. They were not fighting to win. They were fighting to protect. And there is no victory against an enemy who does not care if they survive. He stood up from his stool, his massive body unfolding to its full height. The other customers shrank back instinctively. I beg you, friend. Vraithus looked down at Grezik with ancient, tired eyes. I have seen many terrible things in my long life, but nothing terrifies me more than an angry human defending their family. Never make them angry. Never threaten what they love, because they will not stop. They will never stop. They will fight until there is nothing left of you, or nothing left of them. He turned and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted for him as it always did dot in the corner. Danny Cole finished his drink and stood up to leave with his crew. As he walked past Grezik's bar, the bartender noticed something he had not seen before. A faded tattoo on the human's forearm, barely visible under his sleeve, dotted red, Theta 4 survivors. Danny caught Grezik looking and smiled. It was a warm smile, gentle and kind. The smile of a simple freighter captain who wanted nothing more than peaceful work and good friends. But for just a moment, Grezik thought he saw something else in those tired human eyes. A flicker of fire. A shadow of steel dot, then Danny Cole walked out into the station, and the noise of Nexus 7 swallowed him whole. Grezik picked up Vraithus' empty glass and began cleaning it slowly. He had worked on this station for 20 years. He thought he had seen everything. He had been wrong.